I saw the early trailers of Black Myth Wukong a couple of years ago, and the graphics were just on another level, to the point that I thought it was probably a bunch of bull. But lo and behold, in August this year, Game Science released their Souls-like title, based within the Journey to the West myth, and it's been lauded by the gaming community as a triumph. So I've been a bit slow on the uptake, but I wanted to review Black Myth before the end of the year sales get released, and before the Game of the Year gets announced as well, so that I can answer the question for myself, is it worth it? The story's not the big draw card for me, or probably anyone. It takes place many years after the events of the original Journey to the West myth. Sun Wukong has saved his master, and it seems this emo spear guy with the fart dog is not too happy about it, so he comes with an army to destroy Sun Wukong's mountain. Because... reasons. A fight breaks out, and Sun Wukong gets pounded into monkey mash. Cut to years later, our protagonist begins setting out to collect the special bits of Sun Wukong to bring him back to life. The issue is there's a whole lot of boss fights between us and the end of the game. So let's get to it. It's a typical Souls-like. Find a boss, die 10 times, slowly learn their moveset and timings, do small bits of damage to them while dodging all incoming damage. Do it well enough and you win. Do you like being punished relentlessly by the same enemy over and over and over and over and over again? Well, you're stupid, but you'll probably like this game. There are shrines that act as your checkpoints or bonfires, which allow you to recoup your health while regenerating all the enemies around in the world. You get a health potion or gourd with about 4 or 5 uses in it before it's completely empty, and this also gets refilled at these shrines. Their placement through the game was a welcome relief. I can't complain about there being too few. I think they were perfectly placed, as they were mostly sitting just before a boss encounter with minimal smaller enemies to kill before facing said boss. The shrines also offer the opportunity to craft potions, new weapons and armor, as well as visit the shop to buy supplies if needed. As you win more and more fights, you'll gain focus points to add to your skill tree. Now this thing's pretty crazy. It's got standard things like bigger health bar, larger stamina pool, but also it's got important stuff like staff technique advancements, making your stick bigger horizontally and making your stick bigger vertically. The big ticket attacks are with the powers and the transformations you'll collect along the way. Some of these powers will be unlocked with the story bosses, and some transformations like this fire wolf and this stone baby headbutt are unlocked if you beat some of the optional bosses in the world. They've got a reasonably long cooldown, so it's best to use these when you're sure they'll do the most damage. Generally speaking, the combat feels really smooth. There's no basic attack counter system, at least not until after Act 2, and it's all about the dodge and stamina management. If you time a dodge perfectly, you'll create an image that may confuse your opponent briefly, as well as gains you willpower. It seems to me like this game was mainly meant for controllers, which I tried for a little bit, but I ended up playing on the mouse and keyboard. I think for most people the controller is going to be the best way to approach this game, but personally keyboards have always suited me better. The enemy variety, particularly bosses, is just brilliant. There's wolfmen, there's big bears, giant statues, weird skeleton lizards, bat guys, strange water snakes, and they're just in the first 5 hours. This list is honestly crazy. Props to the design department and everyone who worked on the movesets of these bosses. It's all just so different and so diverse. It keeps the combat fresh, and every encounter is an exciting dose of, what will this one do? The world itself is amazing to trek through. It's mostly one track to follow for the whole game, with pathways that lead to optional areas that can hide secrets, treasures, optional bosses, and occasionally, invisible wall. That's the one downside of having this beautiful world to explore. Sometimes what looks to be traversable isn't, and what looks like it isn't is, if that makes any sense at all. Basically, gird your loins and get ready to strike forth to untold adventure, only to be slapped in the face by the devs. Montage, baby! Between each boss, you'll encounter small enemies that will fall easily to your attacks. They feel just not needed, as you'll be mainly looking for the next challenge. I found these just an annoyance for the most part. They didn't add anything to the story or to my combat techniques, so I'm not really sure what their purpose is besides being something to fill your time between the waltz from boss to boss. Speaking of, I'm god awful at these kinds of games. I've had a hell of a time trying to get through this game, and I'm nowhere near finished yet. I fought this big stone baby about 20 times before I finally took him down. I spent another 10 deaths on this fast-moving snake guy. And Terry the Frosted Flakes tiger here has gutted me enough times that he can bathe in my intestinal juices and still have leftover for supper. I've managed to beat all these bosses, and more after, but it's a slow and steady wins the race kind of situation. Point is, I'm bad at these games, but I've managed a good ways into it because I'm driven by wanting to see more. It hardly needs to be said, but this game is beautiful to the point like nothing I've ever seen in a game. It's showing off at this point. Visually, it's a rainbow smoothie of delight, and I want to drink it all in and drown in its saccharine juices. The light peeking through the treetops in the forest, the dust and the smoke in the desert, the waterfalls, it's just really good stuff. I don't know what kind of voodoo witchcraft they've enacted to make this thing run, but despite its glorious visuals, it can run really nicely for me. I got somewhere between 120 and 200 frames per second on my RTX 4080. I'm not sure how moderate systems would go, but with some graphical settings dropped, I'd be confident it would hit a good blend of playable and still beautiful. I actually had meant to play out the game with the Mandarin voice actors with English subtitles, but I ended up sticking with the English audio too. So far the performances have been pretty rock solid. The monkey actor has some really great noises when he's kicking butt, and it's been a nice time listening to him exert himself. The environmental sound has been good at enveloping me in my headphones and immersing me in the game world. I will say the punches and the kicks of the bosses sound heavy and bone crunching. It's bloody scary. I haven't noticed too much of that dynamic sound occurring in the world, echoes in caves or such like, but it could be because I've been distracted by the visuals or I haven't got far enough in the game quite yet.
The soundtrack kicks into gear during boss battles with acres of war drums and percussion. But when you're just admiring the world and meditating at one of the lookouts, you get treated to these serene melodies. I think probably my favourite so far is Celestial Symphony, which has a bit for everyone. Bombastic sound tempered with an angelic voice fit for the Celestials themselves. The soundtrack is an unbelievable, amazing amalgamation of traditional Chinese melodies with the technology and sound of today. There are even little notes of synth littered throughout that gave a distinct 80s flavour too, which I really appreciated. Truly, this soundtrack is standout work, and it's left me wondering how the OST has not been nominated for the Gaming Awards. From what I've gathered online, it's likely that Metaphor Fantasio or Final Fantasy VII would win out anyway, but I would think this is work worthy of recognition at least.
It's not the type of game I'd usually play, but despite this, its visuals and slick combat have sucked me well and truly into this world. I'm not done with it yet, but I can already see why it's one of the contenders for Game of the Year. I think it's definitely worth the retail asking price for those that are willing to dive in, knowing that there will be frustrations galore along the way. If you manage to get it on sale, then you're getting an absolute bargain.